The moment I stepped inside the courtroom, I saw my parents already waiting. Their smiles were sharp and icy, the same kind that used to freeze me in fear when I was little. They looked convinced the victory was theirs before a single word was spoken. Why wouldn't they be? To the world, they were the dazzling Whitmores from television, adored, admired, untouchable, while I was merely the daughter they'd discarded 2 decades earlier. But the rules of this game had changed. My grandfather, the only person who had ever truly cared for me, had passed away, leaving every cent of his billion-dollar fortune to me alone. Now, the very people who abandoned me at his doorstep were dragging me to court to take it back. Standing before the judge, I could feel my pulse beating so loud it seemed to echo off the marble walls. He lifted his gaze, studying me carefully. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, and then, with a stunned tremor in his voice, he said, "Wait, you're her?" The silence that followed was deafening. My parents' polished confidence fractured as the truth they'd buried for years began to surface. My name is Emma Whitmore, and this is the story of how I lost everything at 5 years old and gained it all back 20 years later. I was only 5 the day they vanished from my world. The Santa Barbara sun was merciless that afternoon, blazing, relentless, scorching everything except the hollow chill inside me. My mother, Victoria, crouched in front of me, her white summer dress fluttering, the scent of lilac clinging to her like a lie. "Be good for Grandpa, all right, sweetheart," she said, her forced smile trembling at the edges. Her lipstick looked too bright, her eyes too dry. My father, Charles, leaned against the car, drumming his fingers on the hood. "Vic, come on. We'll miss the flight." "Flight?" I asked, grabbing her dress with my small hand. "Where are you going? Can I come?" For a heartbeat, she froze. "It's just a quick trip, darling. We'll be back soon." But even as a child, I caught the crack in her voice. She didn't hug me. Instead, she leaned close enough for her earrings to brush my cheek, kissing the air beside my face. Her heels clicked away like a clock ticking down. The car door slammed, tires crunched against gravel, and their silver convertible vanished behind the iron gates. I chased after it until my breath tore in my chest, until my legs gave up. The smell of dust and gasoline hung heavy in the air. I called out to them, but only the wind and faraway seagulls answered. Then a steady hand rested on my shoulder, firm, kind, familiar. Grandpa Henry knelt beside me, his presence quiet but solid. He never spoke in haste. His words always carried meaning. His gray eyes gentled as he brushed the dirt from my knees. "They don't understand what they've lost, my dear," he whispered, his voice trembling with sorrow and love. He paused, tilting my chin upward until our eyes met. "You'll never be unwanted again." He lifted me into his arms as if I were weightless and carried me back toward the mansion. My head rested on his shoulder, and the rhythm of his heartbeat steadied the fear still pulsing inside me. That was the first moment that felt safe all day. Later that night, I sat in the vast kitchen, my legs swinging above the tiled floor while he stood by the stove making cocoa himself. No staff, no formality, just him. "Extra marshmallows, right?" he asked, smiling faintly. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. When he tucked me into bed, the house seemed too large, too still. The slow, steady tick of the grandfather clock echoed like the footsteps of people who would never return. "Will they come back?" I whispered. He hesitated, then ran a gentle hand through my hair. "Some doors, my dear Emma, once closed, should remain shut." Before switching off the lamp, he added quietly, "You'll never have to chase love again. From now on, it lives right here." In the dim light, I clung to his hand and believed every word. That was the night I stopped waiting for my parents and started belonging to someone who truly stayed. Life with Grandpa Henry bore no resemblance to the movies about billionaires. His estate perched on the cliffs of Santa Barbara, gazing out over the Pacific like a silent sentinel. Inside, though, there were no lavish galas or servants bustling about. The rhythm of the house was calm, precise, and filled with meaning. Every morning at 6, his gentle knock woke me. Up, Emma. The world doesn't wait for those who linger. I would shuffle to the kitchen where he sat already with black coffee and the morning paper spread wide. Read this, he'd say, tapping a headline. Then tell me what they're not telling us. At first, I barely understood, a little girl trying to finish her breakfast. But over time, his lesson unfolded. Never believe a story just because it's printed. Truth hides beneath the surface, waiting for those who dare to dig for it. He was the founder of Whitmore Industries, a vast network of shipping and logistics that tied nations together. Yet to him, integrity always outweighed wealth. Money, he'd often say, is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become, so make sure what you crave is worth it. I watched the world bend toward him, politicians eager for his handshake, lawyers seeking his wisdom, employees driven not to disappoint. He ruled with fairness, never cruelty, his authority quiet but absolute. When I turned 10, he finally brought me to his office. The glass towers downtown shimmered under the fading light, glowing like the future he was preparing me to inherit. Inside the building, every person greeted him with quiet respect, and me with cautious curiosity. "This is my granddaughter," he announced, pride in his tone. "Someday she'll ask tougher questions than any of you." His hand rested gently on my shoulder, and I smiled, shy but certain. He wasn't preparing me to inherit power. He was teaching me how to see the truth beneath appearances. Every weekend we'd drive to the community center he'd built. While other tycoons sent checks and posed for cameras, Grandpa stayed for hours, kneeling beside children as they learned to read, or showing teenagers how to manage their first savings. "Power means nothing," he often whispered, "if you use it only to stand above others." When I turned 16, I saw my parents' faces again, glowing on a television screen. They were laughing on a Los Angeles red carpet, promoting a new reality show about redemption. Two beautiful people talking about second chances, about growth, about becoming better versions of themselves. My hands tightened around the remote until my knuckles turned white. Grandpa came in quietly, his eyes following the flickering image. "Do you miss them?" he asked. The truth trembled on my lips, but what came out was softer. "Not anymore." He gave a slow nod. "Good. Missing those who left is like staring at closed doors. You'll miss the ones still open." That night, he handed me a small worn journal bound in brown leather. "For your truth," he said. "One day the world will try to change it. Don't let them." I had no idea then that this book would become my shield, the evidence that would one day protect me when my parents tried to erase me in court. Now, before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I see every single comment and they mean the world to me. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to the story. The morning he passed away, the world felt unsteady. The air hung still, the sea below the cliffs too calm. I found him in his study, his head bowed over his desk, glasses still perched above an open page. The final line he'd written read, "Truth in the wrong hands turns to poison." I didn't cry at first. I just stood frozen, staring at the man who had filled every void in my life. Then the grief broke through, sharp and relentless. His funeral gathered the city's elite, magnates, judges, even ex-presidents, all eager to be seen honoring Henry Whitmore, the man who built an empire on integrity. But I wanted none of that. I just wanted one more hour with him, one more of his lessons, one more warm cup of cocoa on a rainy evening. And then I saw them. My parents stood near the front, dressed in sleek black, faces hidden behind designer sunglasses. My mother, Victoria, dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her tears as convincing as a soap opera performance. My father, Charles, stood rigid beside her, scanning the crowd like a politician counting votes. They hadn't spoken to me in 20 years, hadn't called on my birthdays, hadn't asked about my graduations, my life, my dreams. But here they were, at Grandpa's funeral, looking appropriately devastated. I knew exactly why they had come. After the service, they approached me. Victoria reached out as if to embrace me, but I stepped back. "Emma, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with rehearsed emotion. "We're so sorry for your loss. Father meant everything to us." "Did he?" I asked, my voice flat. "Is that why you haven't visited him in 15 years? Charles cleared his throat. "We've been busy, Emma. You know how demanding our careers are, but we're here now. Family should stick together during difficult times." Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "What do you want?" I asked directly. Victoria's smile flickered. "We just want to make sure Father's wishes are honored. He would have wanted his estate to benefit the entire family, don't you think?" There it was, the real reason they had come. "His wishes are very clear," I said. "He left everything to me. His lawyers have the will." Charles's face darkened. "That will was made when you were a child. Surely he intended to update it. He wasn't thinking clearly in his final years." "He was sharper than anyone I've ever known," I replied, "right until the end." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of cold calculation beneath the performance. "We'll see about that," she said softly. "We'll see." 2 weeks later, I received the court summons. My parents were contesting the will. They claimed Grandpa Henry had been mentally unfit when he wrote it. They claimed I had manipulated him, isolated him, turned him against his own son. They were suing me for the entire billion-dollar estate. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed about the Whitmore family feud. TV shows analyzed every angle. Social media exploded with opinions from people who had never met any of us. My parents gave tearful interviews about being estranged from their father, about wanting to honor his true legacy, about their concern that I had taken advantage of a vulnerable old man. They were good at this. They had spent their entire careers performing for cameras. They knew exactly how to shape a narrative. But they had forgotten one thing. Grandpa had spent 20 years teaching me to see through exactly this kind of performance, to find the truth beneath the surface, to never believe a story just because it was printed, and I had evidence they didn't know about. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters filled the gallery, cameras waited outside. The Whitmore fortune was at stake, and everyone wanted a front-row seat to the spectacle. My parents arrived like celebrities at a premiere. Designer suits, perfect hair, practiced expressions of dignified grief. Their lawyer, Elliot Graves, was one of the most expensive attorneys in California. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never lost a case. I sat at the defendant's table with Robert Hayes, the lawyer Grandpa had trusted for 30 years. Robert was 72, soft-spoken, and completely unimpressed by theatrics. "They're going to try to rattle you," he murmured as we took our seats. "Don't let them." I nodded, my hands steady despite the chaos around me. Then the judge entered. Judge Thomas Nolan was in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. He had a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for nonsense. As he settled into his chair, his gaze swept across the courtroom. It landed on me and stopped. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Surprise. "Wait," he said slowly. "You're her?" The courtroom went silent. My parents exchanged confused glances. Their lawyer looked up sharply. I held the judge's gaze, my heart pounding. Robert rose to his feet. "Your Honor, if I may, Miss Whitmore is indeed Emma Whitmore, the granddaughter of the late Judge Henry Whitmore." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge. My grandfather had been a judge before he built his business empire, one of the most respected in California. Thomas Nolan had been his clerk 40 years ago, back when Grandpa was still on the bench. "I served under Judge Whitmore for 3 years, Nolan said quietly, more to himself than the courtroom. He was the finest legal mind I ever knew. Elliot Graves shot to his feet. Your Honor, if there's a conflict of interest— There is no conflict, Nolan interrupted, his voice sharp. I haven't spoken to Henry Whitmore in over a decade, but I will tell you this. I knew the man, and I will not tolerate any attempt to slander his memory in my courtroom without substantial evidence. He turned back to me, his expression softening just slightly. Miss Whitmore, I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a great man. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed. The trial had barely begun, and already the ground had shifted. Elliot Graves opened with a dramatic presentation. He painted a picture of a lonely old man, isolated from his family, manipulated by a cunning granddaughter who wanted his fortune for herself. He brought in expert witnesses, psychiatrists who had never met my grandfather, but were happy to speculate about his mental state for the right fee. He showed photos of Grandpa in his final years, trying to make him look frail and confused. He read from cherry-picked emails and letters, twisting innocent words into evidence of decline. Through it all, my parents sat behind him, wearing expressions of wounded concern. Victoria occasionally dabbed at her eyes. Charles nodded gravely at every accusation. They were performing, and they were good at it. When it was our turn, Robert Hayes stood slowly. He was the opposite of Elliot Graves. No flash, no drama, just quiet certainty. Your Honor, he began, the plaintiffs would have you believe that Henry Whitmore was a confused old man who didn't know what he was doing when he wrote his will. He paused, letting the words settle. But Henry Whitmore wasn't just any man. He was a former judge of this very court system, a businessman who built a billion-dollar company from nothing, a philanthropist who gave away more money than most people will ever see. Robert walked slowly toward the judge's bench, and he was meticulous in everything he did. He held up a thick folder. These are letters, Your Honor, written by Judge Whitmore over the past 10 years to various colleagues, friends, and fellow judges, including 3 sitting members of the California Supreme Court. A gasp rippled through the gallery. In these letters, he discusses his estate plans clearly and repeatedly. He explains exactly why he chose to leave his fortune to his granddaughter, and he does so with the sharp, precise language of a man in complete command of his faculties. Robert began reading excerpts. My son Charles chose fame over family. My daughter-in-law, Victoria, chose ambition over love. They left Emma on my doorstep like an unwanted package and never looked back. I will not reward that cruelty with my legacy. Victoria flinched visibly. Emma is the only one who stayed, the only one who listened, the only one who cares about truth more than appearance. She is my conscience, and she will carry it forward when I am gone. Robert looked up. These letters span 10 years, Your Honor, each one affirming Judge Whitmore's clear mind, his affection for his granddaughter, and his conscious decision to leave his estate to her alone. Elliot Graves shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. These letters are nothing but emotional theatrics. They prove nothing of legal significance. Overruled, Judge Nolan said, his voice sharp and final. The decedent's intent is exactly what this court is here to determine. Continue, Mr. Hayes. Robert gave me a subtle nod, my signal. I reached into my bag and withdrew the leather journal Grandpa had gifted me on my 16th birthday. Its edges were frayed, the spine cracked, each page softened by years of turning. This, I said quietly, was my grandfather's personal diary. He wrote in it every night until the week he passed. I stood and walked toward the judge's bench, my hands trembling slightly. May I read from the final entry, Your Honor? Judge Nolan nodded. I opened to the last page. The ink had faded slightly, but the handwriting was strong, unmistakably his. My son and his wife live for appearances. My granddaughter lives for truth. The estate must belong to her. Not as a reward, but as protection. She carries my conscience where I no longer can. The silence that followed felt sacred, almost holy. Then my mother's composure shattered. "He was sick," she cried, leaping from her chair. "He didn't know what he was saying. She manipulated him." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. "Mrs. Whitmore, sit down," Judge Nolan ordered. Her words bounced off the wooden walls and dissolved into nothing. I turned toward her, the woman who gave me life but never love, and spoke softly. "No one manipulated him, Mother. He just finally saw you for who you really are." For the first time in years, I felt the truth settle inside me like armor. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I was Henry Whitmore's granddaughter. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now let's finish this story together. By the third day, time itself seemed to drag. Every cough, every whisper, every shifting chair echoed like thunder. I sat at the defense table, fingers locked tightly together, eyes forward. Across the aisle, my parents whispered frantically to their lawyer, their practiced confidence crumbling. Then the door opened. Judge Nolan entered, robes sweeping, his face unreadable. Instantly, the room stilled. He took his seat, adjusted the papers before him, and glanced at me. For just a heartbeat, I thought I saw pride flicker in his eyes. "This court," he began, his voice calm but unyielding, "has examined all testimony, documents, and correspondence of the late Judge Henry Whitmore." He paused. "What stands before me is not evidence of coercion, but of greed, misplaced and deliberate." A low stir spread through the gallery. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's fingers trembled visibly. "The plaintiffs," Judge Nolan continued, "have failed to prove undue influence. On the contrary, the record shows clear intent, mental soundness, and deliberate judgment by the deceased." He let his words hang in the charged air. "Therefore, the court dismisses the plaintiff's claims in full. The will of Judge Henry Whitmore stands. The estate belongs to Miss Emma Whitmore." For a single suspended heartbeat, the courtroom was utterly still. Then came the rush. Pens scratching, cameras flashing, reporters gasping for sound bites. I didn't move. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. Judge Nolan turned his gaze toward my parents. "Justice," he said evenly, "does not belong to blood. It belongs to truth." The words hit like a blow. My father sank into his chair, shoulders collapsing beneath invisible weight. My mother stared blankly at the floor, her lips parted but empty of words. The gavel struck once, a sharp final crack that sounded like the last shot of a long battle. When I rose, my legs trembled. Robert placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's over," he murmured. "You did it." But victory didn't taste like triumph. It felt like ash, the quiet that comes after a storm when the smoke still hangs heavy. As I turned to leave, my mother's hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. Her nails bit into my skin. "You think this makes you better than us?" she spat. "You'll regret this, Emma. You'll end up alone, just like him." I looked straight at her, my voice steady. "I'd rather be alone than hollow." I pulled free. Outside, sunlight flooded the courthouse steps, fierce and blinding, a light that felt like cleansing. The press surged forward, microphones thrust toward me, voices overlapping in a blur of noise. "How does it feel to win?" "What will you do with the money?" I paused halfway down the stairs, the wind off the Pacific tugging at my hair. "It wasn't about money," I said quietly, just enough for every camera to hear. "It was about truth." That night, I sat in the study beneath Grandpa's portrait, the verdict papers resting beside me. I whispered into the silence, "You were right, Grandpa. Truth really does have long arms, and today it finally reached back." Weeks drifted by after the ruling, but peace didn't come easy. The media frenzy faded. The headlines moved on. Yet the quiet that followed felt louder than ever. The estate was legally mine, the mansion on the cliffs, the companies, the fortune, but it all seemed hollow without him. The house felt more like a monument than a home. At night I wandered its long corridors, past oil portraits and echoing floors, and could almost hear his voice woven into the stillness. Power means nothing if you can't live with your conscience. For the first time, I slept without fear, though not without sorrow. Then one evening, as the sun bled into the Pacific and painted the horizon in deep red light, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number glowed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause, then a voice, fragile, shaking. Emma. It was my father, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. The same man who had thundered accusations across a courtroom now spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, fragile, almost breaking. I read the journal, he said, the words halting. Your grandfather's entries. I didn't want to believe them, but I couldn't stop reading. His breath hitched. He wrote that I lost my way, that I stopped being his son long before the will was signed. I closed my eyes. He also wrote that it's never too late to do what's right, I said quietly. There was a pause, then a trembling exhale. I don't deserve forgiveness, Emma, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry for everything, for leaving you, for blaming you, for becoming the kind of father he warned you about. His words hung there, fragile, sincere, and unbearably human. Neither of us spoke for several long seconds. I gazed out the window at the garden, the one Grandpa had planted for Grandma so many years ago. The breeze rustled through the roses, and for the first time in a long while, the silence felt peaceful. I don't know if I can forgive you, I finally whispered, but I know Grandpa would have wanted me to try. He drew a shaky breath. I'll take that. It's more than I deserve. Before the line went dead, he added softly, You remind me of him, the way you never back down. After the call ended, I stayed there, staring at the horizon. The world had gone still again, but not with grief this time. With calm, with healing. I stepped outside barefoot, feeling the cool grass beneath my feet. The sun had slipped beneath the ocean, leaving the estate bathed in warm, golden light. In my hands, I carried Grandpa's journal. Turning to its final page, I read the words that had outlived him. True justice isn't found in courtrooms, but in the hearts of those who keep believing in it. Tears finally came, soft and unhurried. I believe, Grandpa, I whispered. I always will. And in the hush of the evening breeze, I could almost hear his reply. Gentle, proud, at peace. Then I can finally rest, my girl. As the ocean wind drifted through the roses, it struck me with quiet clarity. Justice had been won long ago, but forgiveness, that was the real inheritance he'd left behind. I walked back inside, past the grandfather clock still ticking its steady rhythm, past the kitchen where he used to make cocoa with extra marshmallows, past all the rooms filled with memories that would never fade. I wasn't the abandoned 5-year-old anymore. I wasn't the girl chasing a silver convertible down a gravel driveway. I was Emma Whitmore, granddaughter of the man who taught me that truth was worth more than money, that integrity was worth more than fame, and that real love doesn't leave, it stays. Some people become parents by accident. Some people earn it. Grandpa earned it every single day for 20 years, and now it was my turn to carry his legacy forward. Not the billions, not the business empire, not the mansion on the cliffs. His conscience, his truth, his love. That was the real inheritance, and I would protect it with everything I had. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You'll love it. See you in the next one.